and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
And we're back. I'm Jim. This is Mike, and we're sitting down with two senior leaders from Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. We've got Lieutenant Blackmon and Undersheriff Koren with us. Undersheriff Koren, if I understand it, is responsible for the air unit among a bunch of other assets within Bernalillo County Sheriff. And Lieutenant Blackmon, right, is responsible for the SWAT team. So we have a real treat as far as two core aspects of what Tactical Tangents is trying to do is elevate our understanding of both assets for law enforcement, military, and for a civilian self-defense crowd. And hopefully, if you're a civilian self-defense guy, you don't have to interact with the SWAT team or the air unit.
I mean, you can.
You can.
You can meet my dog, too. There's two ways to do it.
That's right.
And, you know, we talked about with the LT and the Undersheriff right before we started recording here that we're trying to take this back to our ultimate goal of investing in people and trying to develop, you know, leaders in these communities, and these commanders have been generous enough to give us their time to kind of offer some insight about tactics and things related to their jobs.
Right on. And to start us out, can you just give us a little background about yourself, Undersheriff?
Yeah. So first off, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jim, for having us, interviewing us. I listened to a few of your podcasts, and I was pretty impressed with the topics that you're covering. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm the Undersheriff for Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department for the administrative side of the house, and I know the focus on today's discussion is about the air unit, and so I've overseen the air unit for a number of years since I was a deputy, and now the Undersheriff, and it's still under my umbrella, and so I basically helped to develop that unit and bring it into existence here in Bernalillo County.
And are you one of the pilots for it?
I am.
Right on. And for those who aren't familiar with the geography of New Mexico, Bernalillo County is the county that surrounds Albuquerque and kind of the most populous parts of New Mexico. And for those who don't know Albuquerque, it's a great town, but it can also be a pretty rough town. We've got pretty substantial auto theft, and there's been a kind of a streak of murders, I think, in the last couple of weeks especially. So they've got their hands full. It's a busy department, busy agency, and a pretty broad geographic range, right? You've got mountains, flatland, urban, suburban. You got it all here. Lieutenant Blackmon, can you give us kind of your background?
Sure. So again, like the Undersheriff said, thank you guys for what you're doing and putting out a positive law enforcement message to people. So I've been with the department for about 18 years. I've done a variety of things, mostly patrol and detective work. I was on the SWAT team as an operator for 2 years, and I became the sergeant. I was the sergeant of the SWAT team for about 5 years, and I'm currently, for the last couple of years, I'm actually the special operations lieutenant, which includes SWAT as well as K9 and hostage negotiators and our emergency response team. So they all kind of work together in a lot of instances. So I'm in charge of all those together.
Do you guys have a full-time team or auxiliary, secondary?
Our SWAT team is part-time.
Part-time, okay.
And for those not familiar, what that means is you've got a typical deputy who has had additional SWAT training, has his gear in his car, and then on a call-out, responds to the call-out. He's not just doing pure SWAT stuff 24/7, 365, correct?
Correct. So we have guys that are patrol deputies, we have guys that are academy instructors, we have guys that are detectives as their full-time job, and SWAT is an extra duty that they do in addition to everything else.
And they're doing it for all the extra pay, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Right on. Or for the jazz. So one of the things that we try to emphasize on Tactical Tangents is the value of air and the ability to integrate air into the ground picture. When it's done right, it helps. When it's done wrong, it just adds fog and friction, has been my experience. Can you tell us a little bit about the air unit, what you guys have equipment-wise, both the helicopters and the sensors that you have on the helicopters?
Sure. Initially, we had started off with a UE, which was acquired through the military surplus program, and So we ended up picking up this UE from the Army through the military surplus program, actually known as the 1033 program. For $1, it came out of Hawaii, and it was not operational or airworthy at the time. And I happened to be a aircraft mechanic as well, and that was one of my first duty assignments, is to restore that UE. And that was in addition to my duties as a field deputy. And so I took on that project and basically brought it back to life.
How long did that take?
It took about a year. A year and a lot of negotiating with acquiring additional parts and services from other folks. And
now, who made you a mechanic? Is that on your own time, or the Army, or something like that?
That was before I was ever a sheriff's deputy. I was a mechanic, a helicopter mechanic and airplane mechanic.
Right on.
That's funny. With our agency, I know we have pilots, we've got helicopters. We struggle finding mechanics for them. Like that's been the biggest issue for us, is finding someone to fix our helicopter. So we have 3, but I only think at any given time maybe 1 is working.
Yeah.
3 to make 1. That's a common military ratio we have.
So we started off with the UE, and then we ended up acquiring an MD 500, which is
Little Bird.
Little Bird. OH6 would be the military version of it, and that one actually ended up getting shot and totaled during the auto rotation, and that was later on replaced with a A-Star, a Eurocopter. So and that Eurocopter helicopter, that particular model has the world altitude record for landing on top of Mount Everest, and it works rather well for us around here at this high hot altitude in New Mexico. And then most recently, we picked up a small fixed-wing, a Cessna 172, the military version, though, T-41C, which came out through, again, the military surplus program.
Awesome.
Can you tell us about the time that you said a helicopter got shot?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that incident at all?
So it was back in 2005, I believe. We had a contract pilot and a deputy flying around on a call, and it's been a long time, but anyway, they were flying around on a call, pretty low altitude, where there was a suspected burglar in the area, and they ended up receiving a round through the chin bubble to the left pedal of the, as I recall, is the left pedal of the helicopter.
So for those not familiar, that's at the pilot's feet. The round came up through probably between his feet or something like that.
And it hit the left pedal, and the helicopter went to the right, and he put it down, went into auto mode and put it down, auto rotated. This is during the night, middle of the night, under MVGs. Ended up successfully, I call it successfully because they walked away from it, but
that's a win. That's a win.
Auto rotated down to somebody's backyard, and and the
Good morning.
Well, we're used to that here in Albuquerque with hot air balloons coming down in backyards. We had hot air balloons land on our base. It was a good time.
And it was there were reports of a shot fired as well, and there was a little bit of a delay as far as treating it as an accident or a crash versus a crime, and the ballistics, it was indicating that they had been shot down, so they started sweeping the area, and they ended up finding a suspect who was eventually arrested, and then later on, 9 months later, they couldn't find in all the rifles that they confiscated from the subject, none of them matched the ballistics.
Oh, wow.
And so he was ultimately released, and then we end up moving on from there.
So was that completely separate from the they were originally looking for a burglary suspect or something, right?
Completely separate.
Just a separate thing. He just saw a target and went for it.
Yeah.
Just some dude, a helpful citizen.
Yeah,
That's good.
And it's not the first time we've been shot, or I should say, it's not the last time probably either. But oftentimes we don't even know about it while we're flying around in the helicopter. Obviously, we can't hear it. Usually, the reports come from the ground over to the dispatch saying, "Hey, there's a guy standing outside on the ditch bank pointing a gun at you, a handgun or whatever, and rounds are being popped off."
Wow!
But there have been arrests. The most recent one that I recall was when we were were flying over the city, and the guy was doing just that. He was in a courtyard of an apartment and popping off rounds at us.
Did you get him?
The APD officer, the city police officers, ended up arresting him.
I imagine you guys support the city. Do they have their own asset, or do you guys support them a lot?
We do. They have their own helicopter and their own fixed wing, and as you indicated before, it's a hard time keeping some of those aircraft up. So it's a real collaborative effort between both air assets, just like it is with SWAT, the SWAT teams around here. You really have to work as a team, as one.
We have, and I know you mentioned that you've got a fixed wing also. Our sheriff's department does, and so I work for a municipal agency. We've got a helicopter. Well, 3 that are kind of Frankenstein into one at the moment, I think. And then they've got
There's a technical term for that. It's called canning, cannibalizing. You cannibalize chunks off of one, put it on the other.
Right. But so can you talk a little bit about, because you guys have both, and from my perspective as a guy that's on the ground all the time, one of the big things is some situations I really like having a helicopter for. Some situations I really like having a fixed wing for. Can you give me your perspective on that?
Yeah, this is our first run at having the fixed wing, so this is going to be a new experience for us. Although all of our pilots are dual rated in fixed wing and helicopter, we wanted to jump on the opportunity with this small fixed wing because it is a high performance fixed wing, and we're looking at some maintenance scheduling with our helicopters that they're going to be down. But at this point, and I'm very biased towards helicopters, I'd rather have a helicopter up any day for any law enforcement and search and rescue related missions.
Yeah.
But for our fixed wing, there's some benefits towards surveillance.
Yep.
You end up staying up a little bit higher, and people are used to fixed wings operating overhead without drawing much attention, whereas a helicopter tends to draw a little more attention. And the question, especially in this area, the question is it the media or is it the cops?
Yeah.
It typically are the questions. And with the fixed wing, we could stay at a little bit of a distance depending on the airspace in the area, but that's one of the big differences.
What kind of sensor balls do you have on the air assets? Are they all the same, or is it a different one on each one?
So with the helicopters, we have a FLIR, forward-looking infrared cameras with a colored day camera. We also have the ability to do use an IR laser for those people who are wearing night vision goggles, so that people could see the laser who are wearing the goggles, but general public can't.
And we just wrote an article actually about that, fighting at night, and the ability to communicate with the laser. So, for example, if he's overhead and he sees the bad guy and his SWAT guys are on night vision, he can drop a laser on the bad guy and say, hey, look at that guy right there. And if their eyes up, they're going to see it.
And going back to the differences between fixed wing and rotary wing, one of the fixed wing offers a lot of advantages in some situations, but one of the hardest parts is when I'm the guy on the ground and the fixed wing wants to tell me he's over there, or you know what I mean?
Thanks.
He's to your left. The helicopter just hits a spotlight. It's right under my light. It's right here. With an IR laser, it's fine if I have NVGs, but the visible input of having a spotlight goes a long way.
So we do have spotlights as well, and some of those spotlights have various filters that we could flip a switch and go from just a regular light to the IR light as well. So and to even different colors, blue or red.
Cool.
How well can you see through your sensors at a typical operating altitude? Are you able to see like descriptions? He's tan shorts and a black tank top, or
well, a lot of that depends on whether we're operating during the day or during the night. Obviously, during the night, if we're just utilizing our night vision goggles, everything appears green. There are some white phosphorus NVGs out there that everything would just be white, but with the infrared camera, the FLIR, everything is going to be either white or black and white as well. So it doesn't help in a way of giving a very good description as far as colors, but you could tell the difference between a truck and a car and certain.
Can you tell a weapon?
You can if we get close enough. The cameras we currently have require us to kind of get down a little bit low. We're looking at upgrading our cameras to a more sophisticated FLIR system.
Right on.
LT, I got a question for you. The way your department is organized is similar to mine in that as a lieutenant, you're commander of SWAT, K9, hostage. I can't remember what else you listed in there, but have you noticed well, first of all, a preparatory question is going to be, do you guys promote in place, or do you have to, as you promote and you go through sergeant, lieutenant, do you end up other places before you end up in the position that you're in now?
Yes, that's the one we do. So basically, when I was a SWAT operator and a detective, I got promoted to sergeant, and I went back on patrol. And then you're basically at the bottom of the list seniority-wise. Now your seniority is based on people promoted ahead of you, not how long you've been a department member. So I ended up on graveyard, ended up on swing shift. I was a patrol sergeant for about a year and a half before I became a detective sergeant. About 8 months after I got promoted, the SWAT sergeant got promoted to lieutenant, so then we had a vacancy.
Perfect.
So then I basically had to apply for that job and become the SWAT sergeant. Same thing happened. I was a SWAT sergeant for about 5 years. I got promoted to lieutenant. I then became a patrol lieutenant. Back to graveyard, back to the bottom of the barrel. 6 months after that, and with us, the lieutenants are appointed. It's not a testing process.
Okay.
So I think he was the chief deputy or undersheriff at the time, basically called me and said, hey, we need another tactical commander. Are you interested? This is now your new job.
And you're like, yeah.
Right. So I basically ended up right back.
So that's good. I'm glad that you guys do it that way, because it sets me up for my next question, which is, what are the differences you've noticed as a commander or just as a police leader in general, dealing with, and I don't want to, maybe dealing with isn't the right word, but leading, managing, supervising patrol assets, specifically guys that are more junior and stuff versus guys that are in specialized, guys or gals in specialized units like SWAT, hostage, K9. Has your leadership philosophy in dealing with one group or asset, or even detectives, obviously, again, kind of another sort of, maybe not subculture,
category.
Yeah, but category or personality type that tends to draw those assignments out of people?
There is. So I'm big on playing to people's strengths. I have guys on SWAT that are good at certain things, more so than others. I have detectives, really good at doing interviews, but I've got guys that are better at catching bad guys. So I try to play to their strengths. I've had, we have newer guys on the team that have been on the department a very short time, and we have guys that have been on the department 19 years that are still patrol deputies and still on the SWAT team.
And great patrol guys. It's not to take away from, when I talk about patrol as a category, it's not to take away from anyone in patrol so much as just say that there are some cops or deputies that come in and they really, really like patrol, and that's just where they're happy. And then there's some people that really like the investigative stuff. They like the follow-up. They like the detail. And then some people go into those specialized units like, K9, for example.
Figuring out what you like versus what you're good at.
Yeah.
And what the agency needs, I imagine. So if I'm like a young guy coming into your agency, I imagine you probably get this question a lot. How do I get on SWAT?
Right.
What advice do you give a young guy who says, that's all I want in life is to be a SWAT guy?
And we do get that a lot. I do a lot of interviews for people coming into the academy. I've been on the boards for new hires, and one of the questions is, what are your career goals going to be if we make you a deputy? And all the specialties are usually the things that are named. They'll say SWAT, they'll say K9, they'll say traffic, they'll say detective, they'll say helicopters, all the cool stuff you see as a kid and grow up, want to ride motorcycles. After the fact, then if I'm meeting some of these people or when I'm teaching at the academy, and they'll ask, okay, what do you have to do to be on the SWAT team? Knowing that that's what I'm in charge of. And being on the SWAT team is probably one of the harder testing processes you have to do, more so than a detective or any of the other specialties, because most of the other specialties you have to take a written test and do a file review and do an oral board interview. That's pretty standard for any specialty.
Whereas there's a bunch of physical performance and
so
shooting
SWAT,
performance.
You have to shoot. You have to shoot the pistol, shoot the rifle. You have to shoot 90% on everything we do. In addition to the written test, we do 1.5 mile runs, and then right after that, we do an obstacle course where they're in kit. I want to say a beast, but just like a flak vest, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
They're wearing a helmet, they're wearing boots, they're climbing fences, they're dragging metal sleds, they're lifting up ammo cans full of concrete. Very taxing physically. From that, they go change, put on their Class A uniform, and they come down and do an interview. After that, we review their file.
Hopefully they get a shower in there.
Probably not. We rush them.
Yeah,
we go eat, they go home and change.
So how has, obviously SWAT has been part of your career the whole way, and I've had commanders as a SWAT guy myself who were SWAT guys and who were not. How has your experience as SWAT, as you've risen through the ranks, changed your leadership style? How has that insight helped develop you as a leader? Has that made any impact?
I think it makes a huge impact when you're in charge of something that you've done before. Because I know exactly what my sergeant's job entails because I did it for 5 years.
It takes a shooter to lead a shooter.
Right.
Is a big saying in
I
SOF.
know exactly what a SWAT operator is going through because I did it. I went through SWAT school. I was kicking indoors. I was throwing flashbangs. And I think that's in any specialty. If you're in charge of detectives, if you're in charge of motorcycles, if you're in charge of the air unit, if you've been where they've been, I think they listen to you more. I think they respect your opinion more. And I think you have a greater insight because you know exactly what you're telling them to do or what not to do when it comes to decision making, when it comes to tactics.
Yeah, and similar question for the air unit. If I'm a young deputy and I want to be a helicopter pilot, what do I need to do? Do I need to go get a pilot's license?
No, if anything, there are some things that make you a little more attractive to be into the air unit, and a lot of it has to do with your attitude and having the right attitude going into the air unit, like any other specialty, is probably the key thing. And what I find is that the people although they often associate going into an air unit as becoming a pilot, it's often not the pilots that we need. It's tactical flight officers, it's technicians, people who have some other skills that kind of help to expand and broaden our mission and our mission capabilities. And so somebody who might have, for example, the aptitude or a background in ropes and rescue is a good way to kind of an ancillary thing to augment our missions. It's not always I want to be a pilot. If they wanted to be a pilot, they probably should have gone into maybe the Air Force as a pilot. But if, for example, somebody came along and they wanted to be a mechanic in addition to being a law enforcement officer, that's a thumbs up. And being a pilot is good too.
Seems to have worked out all right for you.
Yeah, but those are the pilot. I get people hitting me up all the time who want to fly for our agency, and a lot of them already are pilots, helicopter pilots, fixed wing pilots. And when I tell them, well, you have to go through the academy, and they back away pretty quick.
They're like, that involves pepper spray, and that's a nope.
I've heard other agencies say it's easier to take a cop and make him a pilot than to take a pilot and make him a cop. Is that a?
I think that's probably a fair assessment. There's something dynamic that happens when you have two law enforcement officers, and typically we fly for law enforcement patrol, two law enforcement officers up front, the pilot and the tactical flight officer. We aren't going to put a civilian or contract pilot in the position of being a tactical flight officer and giving directives to law enforcement officers on the ground. There's just too much liability and a lack of experience that they just cannot gain, even if they're a reserve deputy or something along those lines.
Yeah. So this is something that Jim and I have talked about, and I want to get your spin on it. I already know Jim's spin on it. I work with him. But along those lines, we think that there's at least some complementary characteristics of pilots and police officers. They're used to managing crises. They're used to thinking under pressure. They're used to working under tight constraints in terms of procedure, we'll call it. I mean, obviously in law enforcement, it's a little bit different. You've got kind of policy and legal stuff and all these other things. But in the same sense, pilots have a lot of
We got
things.
some rules.
Yeah, we got some rules and procedures and kind of some boundaries and limitations on what you're going to be capable of. How do you think those two personality types kind of mesh well together? Having obviously done both, you're a pilot and a cop, how do you think those played well together?
Well, I think some of it is I think they do play well in the way that there's a great deal of pilots out there. First of all, that you have to even on the civilian side, having to deal with the federal aviation regulations and knowing that there's procedures in place for just about everything that you could think of. There's always those outlying factors that you haven't planned for, but you know that through your training and your experience and what regulations are out there, you have a pretty good idea what you could do and get away with and still come out on top. And I think with law enforcement, it's ingrained in you, even going through the academy, that you have the same type of procedures in place, and it comes down to getting the muscle memories down, whether it's flying an airplane or a helicopter, or whether it's your muscle memory tactically, like Brandon Blackmon has with the SWAT team and some of the things that he needs to do.
Can you speak toward the interaction and integration of SWAT and air? I imagine that typically the type of scene that would require one usually requires the other.
Yeah.
Do you train together constantly or not? Or
we try to get at least one training session a year with SWAT, which includes basically ingress egress type procedures and setting up LZs and some tracking down of suspects, and it comes in handy and with a part-time SWAT team. It comes in handy because some of that training it rolls over into the other aspects where our law enforcement officers on the deputies who maybe on SWAT, they go out they're out in the field, and then they have to help land a medical helicopter, for example. So that helps out as well. And then we do that training because we don't want to be caught off guard with new SWAT members coming in and out. We don't want to have anybody who doesn't feel comfortable working in and around the helicopter when the time does come for us to deploy.
So for those not familiar, most helicopters have tail rotors, and human heads and tail rotors do not mesh well.
No.
Well,
So
I mean, they probably mesh fine.
yeah,
It's a poor outcome, though.
messes up the helicopter. So
What kind of prompted us to get into training was we had an incident years ago when it wasn't a big incident, believe me, but it was we were looking for some explosives. Somebody had stolen some explosives out in the West Mesa area, and we had a team of federal agents and some of our own SWAT personnel flying around in the Huey for the first time, and we would basically doing knock and talks with welfare checks on squatters out in the desert. And I noticed after about three landings and having these guys egress out of the helicopter, and this is relatively flat terrain, but it's a little there's some prairie dog holes and whatnot. These federal agents especially were falling on their face. And so one of our guys ended up having a fall as well.
Would happen.
I'm going to reserve any personal comments on
So we started implementing designing a course for our own guys as far as ingress egress out of the helicopter, and I think it's helped quite a bit. And we haven't had any incidents like that. And we've since then I think that class has actually expanded to not only our law enforcement officers, but it's gone over to the neighboring SWAT teams as well, and emergency response teams, and now firefighters and search and rescue personnel, and so it's a pretty popular program.
An increasing number of agencies are shooting from helicopters. Is that a discussion your agency has had, and is that something that you train to?
Yeah, we have had that discussion. In fact, we have some lesson plans already developed on shooting from the helicopter. It's not something that we're moving aggressively in that direction, but we always have to kind of keep that on the table as a consideration at this point. So yes, we have discussed it.
It's a definite maybe.
Got it.
Definitely
But
maybe.
one of the key things that I would offer about that is it's one of those things that it's not like the movies. If you're not training to it, it will be very hard to do it in a crisis, right? So I would offer to anyone who's thinking about that for their agency, you need a syllabus, you need to train to it. It costs time and money. because it turns out the helicopter's moving, the bad guy's moving, and there's lead and lag.
Yep. Angles, gravity, ballistics. The distance is always going to be not only high but varying.
And in the military, we can account for a lot of that with rate of fire that you may not be able to do in a law enforcement scenario. I would offer.
We're responsible for every round we send downrange.
And,
so send them all. I'm just kidding.
And speaking of sending rounds downrange, this particular agency has had a number of law enforcement involved shootings in the last year, I would say. I don't actually know the number, but it's more than 5, less than 10.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
About 9.
I was pretty close. Can you speak to them in kind of general terms? You may not be able to go into the details on any one of them, but lessons learned from them, trends or patterns that you're seeing in the scenario that got you to the shooting. Like, is it a guy trying to take your gun? Is it a guy trying to hit you with his car?
Specifically, have there been any big training takeaways that you guys have said, okay, we're going
to fix that,
prepare for this in a different way?
We're constantly always reviewing our practices, our training, and our policies, and that's something that we do all the time. And on occasion, we even invite and welcome outside experience and knowledge and people to give us some idea of what they're seeing that maybe we're not seeing. So that's an ongoing thing. And I think Jim hit on this earlier, and as far as trends that we're seeing, and the big trend around here is the increase in crime. And we've seen over especially the past 7 years that some of these crimes, especially auto theft, has just been off the charts. And the auto theft, and with the role of kind of standing down in terms of pursuits due to liability and insurance reasons and things of that nature, there's been some bit of hesitation in engaging suspects. And keep in mind that the auto theft is just it's a vehicle to do some other crime typically.
Yeah, it's a gateway offense.
Yes,
and the thing that drives me nuts about auto theft, and you mentioned the pursuit stuff, which is
it's a pet peeve of ours.
It's a huge thing. Obviously it's a difficult balance, right? The thing that gets me about things like that is we tend to downplay those as property crimes, but the impact that they have on our citizens is huge.
The misery impact across the city is distinct, right? Can you talk about trends in the tactics the bad guys are using? How are they stealing cars? How are they targeting cars to steal? And counter tactics that if I'm a citizen living in Albuquerque or up in the eastbound or Rio Rancho, what can I do to make sure my car isn't the one that gets stolen?
Yeah, and I'm not in auto theft, but I've seen it. But I've seen plenty of from the air pursuits and people stealing cars, and it's some of the things are as blatant as stealing a car, getting into a short chase and jumping out of one truck and walking over to another one and stealing it within 30 seconds, and in view of the helicopter, and no hesitation at all. And it's kind of this blatancy and knowing that because there's this idea that and the bad guys typically know it, that most agencies are not going to pursue them just for a stolen car, and we understand that, but usually there's some other mitigating situation or aggravating situation.
One of the things that I've seen just as a local is even when the guy is arrested, and this isn't on your agency, but they're out on bail or bond immediately after, and they're stealing cars while they're out on bond awaiting trial for the last one.
Right. I think I dealt with that a lot. I was the property crime sergeant for 4 years, including auto theft.
Yeah.
And it's the amount of frustration that these guys have to deal with that are doing all the paperwork is ridiculous, because we're arresting people that have literally been arrested for auto theft 19, 25, 33 times. And they don't get any more of a sentence. They don't get any more time.
How many times do I have to steal a car before I go to prison?
Right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm in the wrong
to
business.
answer your previous question about like victims and how do you prevent it.
Yeah.
And I used to go to a lot of these community meetings, and people will say like, not only auto thefts, but regular burglaries, regular thefts. And it's a great deal of common sense, I think, or lack thereof, that's getting people ripped off.
Yeah, and it puts us in a delicate balance, right? We don't want to blame the victim. However, there's an awful lot that a victim can do to dial down their risk.
Right. And I tell people that, like, we get a huge spike, probably like a 400% increase in car thefts the first day it gets cold. Because everybody warms up their car, they go out, they start it, and they leave it, they go back inside, get their coffee, finish getting dressed, or do whatever, and they come out and their car's gone.
So it's like it's common sense, but there's a bypass switch somewhere that people are just like, no, it makes total sense now looking back that it happened that way. But
right.
you should have known.
Always say, like, you know what?
It's like a complacency thing.
Right. Or people, they pull up to a gas station, leave the car running, go in for a pack of gum or a pack of smokes, and it's always, I just left it for a second. I'm like, well, did you see the guys who were hanging out outside the gas station just waiting for somebody to leave just for a second?
People underestimate how fast a car can be stolen. I thought that was a great point. It's 30 seconds, even while they're being watched. They can get the car and go.
And guys will literally drive around at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, because they're on meth and, they're up all night. And they're just looking for the exhaust fumes coming out of a muffler.
Yeah.
And they've got somebody giving them a ride, so they just drop them off, they take that car, and they're gone.
Yeah.
An alarm on your car, I tell people, get a remote. You can get a remote start on your car for $100. Start your car from inside your house. Warm it up or cool it off or whatever it is you're doing in the summertime, in the wintertime. And then if they get in there to steal it, they can't. The car's dead. There's no key.
What do you think of the club? And this is an unsolicited shout out to them. I use one because I am terrified of having my car stolen here.
I'll tell you the truth. I've been using a club for about 25 years on my car. And I'm probably the only person. I was going to say I'm the only person I've ever seen do it. Aside from you two.
Unsolicited shout out. I'm a believer. They're not paying us to say that.
And and that goes along one of the things. The main thing I tell people is make yourself harder to steal.
Mike, make a note.
I tell people, make it harder to steal from you.
Yeah.
Lock it up. Put a club. Get an alarm. If they want your car bad enough, they'll get a tow truck and they'll take it. If you have the best car in the world. But your neighbor probably has a car easier to steal than yours.
Everyone else has a Honda Civic too.
You don't have to run faster than the bear. You have to run faster than your friend.
Exactly right. So make it harder than the guy next to you. Same thing with your house. Lock your doors. You know what I mean? Don't leave $1,000 in cash in your sock drawer. Don't leave your purse in the shopping cart and then walk off down the aisle to find something else. You're asking for it.
Speaking of shopping carts, and this is a little off topic, but I belong to a neighborhood Facebook page. I see some value in it, although a lot of the time it's just people saying, I saw a car in my neighborhood. I don't know what to do.
I got
regularly
an epic debate with someone over that on my Facebook page.
Regularly, either base spouses or my neighborhood Facebook page will post, I was in Walmart and someone was kind of following us around and being creepy. I see that constantly. And the standard response is, well, did you call the cops? Well, no, but they were super creepy. And then they followed me as I drove out of the parking lot. Can you guys speak from your tactical understanding of what I should do if I'm a mom and I've got my kids in the stroller and someone's following us around a shopping environment?
You're talking about somebody following you around in the store?
In the store, and then you go out to the parking lot and you see them kind of tracking you. I say that only because I see it a lot.
Been followed home,
yeah,
literally, because of what they just bought at the store or because they have a super nice car. If you notice it, I think one of the main things I tell people just in general in the store, in the parking lot, when you see somebody that you think is suspicious and nobody wants to make eye contact. People always want to pretend like, well, I don't want to look directly at that creepy guy. And I'll tell people, stare him down. Look right at him.
Dominate them.
Get a good description. Let him know you see him.
That's a good point.
Because they don't want to be noticed.
Yeah.
They want to sneak up on you. They want you to be texting or Facebooking on your phone, and then they're going to jump you and take your purse, or take your phone, or take your car, or take you.
Yep.
So I tell people, stare right at him, get a good description, look him in the eye, and most of the time, people are like, oh, crap,
it'll take some of their initiative because they're looking for, we did the counter ambush thing, and they're looking for that surprise attack. They're looking for that, their intentions are concealed.
They're picking their victims.
Yeah,
they're picking the people that aren't paying attention.
Yeah,
that's funny. My wife, she's been known to. She runs into something like that, she'll get in a position where of safety, by another store employee or some area where other people are around. She'll pull out her phone and just take a picture of them blatantly.
Yep,
that's a good.
That you want to scare off a bad guy? Take his picture.
Yeah.
Taking a picture is a good tactic.
Yeah. And along the lines of a store employee, is it better to go to the manager of the Mega Mart, or is it better to call 911?
I would say call 911 if you have an emergency.
Okay.
If you just think something's kind of weird, pay attention. stay in the store. I mean, there's no rush. You know what I mean? Unless you have some kind of emergency you're getting to. If you think somebody's following you in the parking lot, go back inside. You know what I mean? Go back inside and tell a store employee, tell a security guard, you know what I mean, that guy's being kind of weird. Can you walk me to my car? Ask one of the guys pushing shopping carts. Would you mind going with me to my car? Because I think that guy's eyeballing me.
Strength in numbers.
If it's something much worse, then by all means call the cops. But if you see somebody following you, don't go home. You know what I mean? Pull into a gas station. Pull into something that's well lit, occupied. Pull into a place where there's people. And if the guy pulls up behind you, I mean, call the cops. Take off. You know what I mean? Be smart about it. Don't drive home and run inside and now just pray for the best.
Or just look down back at your phone.
Exactly.
Oh, whatever.
I'm going to Facebook that
Facebook
I'm about to get
that
mugged.
someone's following me. Yeah, that's good.
Undersheriff, you hit on something a few minutes ago. It's kind of changing gears back a little bit, but you were talking about pursuits and dealing with car thefts and things like that. And you mentioned something about officers who are engaging less or maybe a little reluctant to engage. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't remember exactly how you said it. But it gave me that impression. Before I ask my question, does that sound right, more or less?
Yeah, I think there over the years there's been a reluctance to engage and to rush in to situations in which now it seems like it kind of goes back up and down depending on the staffing levels for an agency and whatnot. But it seems like there is a tendency when manpower is low to slow down the response time to situations and to basically wait, or as a result, you end up having the dust settle after an incident. Then it's just a matter of taking a report rather than apprehending a bad guy.
Right.
And in the context of self-defense, it's very important that people understand that there is going to be a delay between calling 911 and getting help. And you're on your own for however many minutes that is. And if you live, especially in a rural environment, it might be 30 minutes until anybody can get to you. And so for those 30 minutes, you have to be prepared to repel borders.
One,
right?
one of the things, tactical tangents, right? Tangent.
Pew, pew.
One of the tangents here. One of the things that I've been dealing with a little bit in my agency, or participating in training. We've been talking about some counter ambush training and you're getting attacked kind of when you do certain things. And, a lot of cops, they have this script in their head. They've written the script in their head where they already know what it's going to look like if they get in a shooting. Every cop has imagined that, right? Would you guys agree? You guys, I don't know if you've been in any, but before you get in a shooting, you've walked yourself through like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Boom, boom, boom. You kind of have that rehearsal.
You visualize the scenario.
So part of that script, though, is, okay, shots get fired, bad guy goes down, you get on the radio, shots fired, start request medical attention, however you say that in your agency. And so what tends to happen, because we've scripted that, is the shots get fired and you hit the play button. And so there's a couple of videos out there of this where you'll see cops that get on the radio, and maybe it's not the best time to be on the radio. There's one video, and I won't dime anybody out, but there's one video where a guy gets literally knocked on his butt. He gets butt stroked with a rifle, and he's sitting on the ground still. The guy goes running around the corner, and he's on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things in terms of shaping decision making is that no matter what, you could get on the radio right that second. Your help is still at least X seconds away.
Yeah.
So get up on your feet.
And you still have a problem to solve.
Exactly.
And you
So
do
get up
want
on your
help
feet.
rolling to you, but
timing is important,
Yeah.
And so this is funny because we talked about the aviation, the parallels, and
I know where you're going with that.
one that I got from Jim is aviate, navigate, communicate, right? And that's what I've been telling cops and I actually talked about this in one.
you got to come up with the cop version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about that in our episode though, where it's like, yeah, you want to get the help, you want to get the radio call out, but you still need to you still have
fight.
a problem to solve, right? Fly
And
the
we've
airplane.
done that a lot. I think we've had guys do exactly that. They're on the radio in the middle of a fight. Maybe not a gunfight, but a fist fight. I've been in knockdown, drag out fights where the guy helping me or supposed to be helping me is on the radio calling for help.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, what the hell are you, man? Like, you are my backup.
We have the
It's
same
like the little
So
cartoon.
put your radio
I'm helping.
down. Right. Put your radio down and help me win this fight.
in canine situations. It's the same thing. We'll be out on a search looking for a guy that ran from the cops. I have a cover officer with me, and now the guy's climbing out from under a car or a trash can or something, and they're on the radio, and I'm like, I have an angry Malinois at the end of my leash. Can you please point a gun at this guy? Because I'm not in a good spot to shoot this dude. So
For those who don't know, it's a dog that people call a German Shepherd. So
yeah,
and we try and teach that now, and we've been teaching it for years. Actually, I think sometimes human nature takes over, and you get excited, and you just think,
well, it's a
call for help.
You've got that script,
right?
And
So
it's
we
how
try to-
training plays that
and
role.
it's
And
not-
we teach exactly. We quote part of what you'd say. We'll tell people in the academy: navigate, then communicate.
Yeah.
Handle business, and then talk about it.
and it's not news. If you recall from the Newhall shooting, which is kind of a classic law enforcement shooting, I believe it was California Highway Patrol, got in a gunfight. It didn't end well. And one of the lessons that came out of that was a guy was picking up his brass in the middle of the gunfight because that's what he had been programmed to do in range training.
Yeah. And that story has gotten kind of, I think that anecdote has gotten twisted around a bunch, but it definitely brought attention to that idea of, training scars.
Be careful what you're training. Yep.
So, Undersheriff, again, tangent right? Back to what we were getting at, or what I was trying to get at, was this climate that we're dealing with, or we've dealt with, I guess, for the last, 5 or 10 years now. I think we've seen this big push where, okay, cops need to get a little bit more in control of their emotions and maybe better at making use of force decisions. But maybe that pendulum has swung to a point where now we're slowing down to the point where we'd rather not get in trouble than catch bad guys. I don't know if that's something that you guys have seen at all.
Or asking permission higher and higher and higher before I'll chase a bad guy.
But there's going back to like those balances and rules, and we have guidelines. And people are trying to not get in any trouble, but at the same time, they want to catch the bad guy. And there's a difficult balance that we're constantly trying to find. Philosophically, as an undersheriff, and I want obviously the LT's perspective here too. How do you teach that to a new guy? How do you teach that to a rookie? Is there a philosophy that you think fits well with trying to help guys find that balance? Because I think both of you have a tactical background, heavily tactical background, air support, SWAT, all those things. So that's a lot of experience to make up for in a guy that comes out of a 15 or 20 week academy. I don't know how long it is here. What's your philosophy on that? How do you think you shape that?
I don't think Brandon would disagree with this, but the mentorship that needs to go on is key, because obviously all of our policies are set in blood because somebody made a mistake.
Yep.
And it's important to have that mentorship, and we try to look for those personalities that there's different styles of learners.
Mm-hmm.
Some people learn through experience better than they learn through listening to somebody else, but ideally we want to get somebody who could pass along their experience to the recipient of that knowledge, who's willing to learn from somebody else's mistakes rather than making their own. And I think that's probably the key factor, is just having that mentorship there. And I think we do a pretty good job of that with our training program, and then having our young deputies who are integrated into the field with older deputies, as more seasoned deputies. And even along the ways of the specialty units of like SWAT, there's senior guys like Brandon here and other guys who have been in SWAT for many years, and so as the younger deputies with a different attitude that may be reasonable at that time during their career, they may be making so-called reasonable decisions, and I probably would make the same type of decisions at that time too. But if I didn't have the experience handed down to me from somebody else.
Yeah. And I think part of what Undersheriff's talking about is when he says mentorship, we're partially is discussing like our field training program,
Mm-hmm.
which is after the academy.
Right.
So I think there's only so much you can teach somebody in a classroom, or teach somebody in a sterile environment where they know you're just shooting die marking cartridges and nobody there's really going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And then you go out into the street, and what Undersheriff Koren's talking about is we pair up cadets out of the academy with FTOs that kind of match their personality, their level of training. So we get somebody who we know is, skittish talking to people, or, engaging a bad guy because they're just, they're a brand new cop and they've never done this before. And we get them with somebody who's a little more aggressive, and somebody who's going to kind of bring them to that point and explain, this is how things are. Part of the challenge I think we face, guys that have been around as long as me and Larry have, is there's things you have to be careful of now that you didn't have to be 18 years ago when I joined, 20 years ago when he joined. Cameras and the public perception and, use of force issues, they didn't get brought up back then. It was, here's how you go home at night, here's how you catch bad guys, and, there were things that were frowned upon, and there were things that were illegal, and there were things that, everything in between. And now it's much different. Now it's like, well, you better be careful of that, not because it's a violation of policy, but because somebody might film you doing it, and
It will cause drama.
You may get hung out to dry on the channel, whatever, news. So it's just different. So people now, I think, like what he's talking about, being more hesitant. It may not be a violation of policy, it may not be against the law, but it's like, man, I don't want to be on the news saying...
It's getting tried in the court of public opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the things that I think maybe some people fail to realize is that, there's a learning curve. This level of accountability, and no one is saying that the accountability is a bad thing, but there is going to be a learning curve, and we do have to catch up with that. And it's difficult to find that balance because we're all learning kind of as we go. I had another follow-up to that, but before I get to it, I want to just talk about it along those same lines. You talk about field training and kind of that idea of mentorship. The leadership thing is a big thing. What do you guys think about the difference? So kind of from like a commander perspective, you guys have a guy that screws something up, right? And there's some degree of accountability that's expected in terms of formal documentation, formal discipline. And then you've also got, the peer thing where the informal stuff where the guys are supposed to take him out behind the shed and be like, dude, what's your problem? Like, you totally screwed that up, right? Where do you think, what is kind of the balance there? Because one of the things that I think is happening now is we're seeing people that are going through cameras and they're finding every little mistake, and all those little mistakes are getting written down on paper and they're going in files. And I'm not sure if that is the most effective way of shaping their behavior as pulling them aside and saying, hey man, that's not cool. Like, you got to fix this, and leaving it at that. What do you guys think?
I think it's really a combination. Think in terms of a family, and you have your brothers and sisters and your aunts and uncles, and ultimately the official decision on your discipline and corrective action is going to end up being with your parents, even though your uncles and aunts and sisters and brothers might give you some informal direction and guidance in one way or another, and whether your parents authorize that or not, it's going to happen. And law enforcement often and fire, all EMS, they tend to look at their specialties as a large family. And so there is that social aspect within that family that helps keep people in line. And I think you can't make that separation. And I really think it's a combination.
As a police leader, do you think it's important to encourage your guys to do that, or to give them that? Do you believe in that kind of social peer leadership idea?
I think in the beginning of somebody's career with the proper mentorship, that kind of criticism, constructive criticism, goes a long ways, and they're given a lot of latitude to be able to do that.
And I agree. I think people consider more what their peers think of them than getting a letter of reprimand in their file.
And that's what I was and I imagine your team is similar to mine in that SWAT's very good at that. For at least on my team. We're very good at holding each other accountable. That stuff doesn't
the value
go
of
in
the
a file.
debrief in
Absolutely.
general. Right.
We do that a lot. I actually stress that. We just interviewed for new SWAT positions 2 weeks ago. And I try to tell these new guys, like, in a debrief, there's no rank, there's no hard feelings, there's nothing personal. You are going to get shredded. And guys, what I've noticed now more so in the last few years is guys will shred themselves.
Yep.
Instead of where it used to be all finger pointing and like, you know what you did? You went left when you should have went right. People will walk in and be like, okay, I'm next to talk. I totally screwed this up.
Yep.
I should have covered long and I didn't, or I should have held on the stairs and I didn't. That was my bad. I apologize. So they're calling themselves out before anybody else has a chance to.
And that's a big deal, because I think when we talk about shaping behaviors, we're trying to make people better. That peer accountability goes a long way.
And I try to encourage that when guys come to me with an issue as a sergeant or even now as a lieutenant.
Yep.
I kind of tell them, well, how do you want this handled? Like, are you coming to me because you want me to handle it as a lieutenant? And you want me to document it? You want me to do some official counseling? Or are you just griping? Are you just venting? Because I think the 4 of you that have an issue with that one guy ought to take him behind the shed, like you said.
Yeah.
Call him out. Be like, hey, dude, you are screwing this up. You're leaving us high and dry, whatever the case is. I said, if you've tried that and didn't work, and now you want me to handle it, it's going to be a little bit more official. So, and if it can be just an ass chewing, I just call your mobs. I'm like, hey, dude, you messed this up. This is not on the record, but I better not see it again.
Right.
If it's something blatant.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's personality issues, if it's training issues, those are things that are all fixable, I think. Some have to be on the record and documented, depending how blatant it is. I did way more one-on-one ass chewings than I have ever done written discipline.
And obviously there's a balance, because you absolutely have to document stuff.
Right.
That's not the case at all. But I love that you certainly seem to empower your guys. And Undersheriff, I love your family analogy, because I think that fits in really well. Formal discipline from making dad mad.
And the military has a long history of informal discipline, and every once in a while we'll take it too far, and that's how you get like the movie A Few Good Men, whatever, and the Code Red, or the shower party, or whatever they call it. Where they take turns beating a guy in the arm because he jacked up. So there's a limit, and that's one of the things where you as a leader kind of set the left and rights, right?
You have to have that ability and that latitude to be able to let your guys make some mistakes to learn, and that goes to strengthen your crew coordination for as far as whether it be in an aircraft or with a team like the SWAT team.
And on crew coordination, we're big on that, and crew resource management and communication. Can you speak to any issues or lessons as far as how the helicopter needs to talk to the guys on the ground, and how the guys on the ground need to talk to the helicopter? Any general lessons?
We look at it, the guys on the ground just as important and integral as for crew coordination as the guys inside the helicopter to get the mission done. Whether it's setting up a perimeter and apprehending the bad guy within that perimeter, or whether it's a search and rescue mission, or even a firefighting mission that we do.
Do you guys have the hardware for firefighting?
Yes, we do. Cool. We do firefighting as well.
That's awesome.
So we attach a bucket to the bottom of the helicopter.
Yeah. Where do you get the water here?
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Here's the thing.
look for somebody swimming.
1,000 miles in every direction. Just desert.
A lot of swimming pools up in the heights.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. On the search and rescue, can you speak to how much your agency does that? And if I'm a survivor on the ground, what can I do to get myself rescued?
So here locally, there's usually about 30 search and rescue missions a year in this area, and a lot of them will end up getting called out to just to look for a person, and we kind of have to go through our own risk assessments on whether or not we're going to rescue them or just help guide people into the guides ground crews to locate the subject and bring them back. But as far as what somebody could do if they're out for a hike and they get lost or they need some help, first thing is, before you ever go on that hike, is to be prepared. Know what trail you're going to go on. Take the proper equipment, such as a map or GPS and things of that nature. It's always good to have a lighting source and all the proper attire for your day hike.
A fully charged cell phone.
And a fully charged cell phone.
Cell phone.
Yes, that's probably one of the more helpful things nowadays. And then if you are on your hike and you get lost, it's pretty much a matter of sheltering in place, staying in place, and trying to make that call for 911 so we could do some triangulation on your cell phone or get GPS coordinates to try to locate you. Again, before you ever go on that hike, let people know where you're gonna go, so that and what time you kind of expect to be back. And a lot of it is dictated by the season and the elements as far as what you would want to do if you're out and you're lost and during the winter cold, is to basically shelter in place, put on the clothes that you have, and use your flashlight or some other lighting source, especially during the night, to try to signal the helicopter. And during the summer, we run into a variety of issues during the summer as well, with people getting dehydrated and things of that nature, and it ends up being a some long nights if they're stranded in a certain area. But we have the capability. Well, sometimes it's not always just hurry up and pluck them off the mountain. Sometimes it's just a matter of dropping some supplies down to them so that they could be sustained for a night.
On the topic of escalation, de-escalation, one of the things that I think people forget is the helicopter or air asset in general can be part of that escalation, de-escalation. Have you guys ever used the helicopter to corral or stop somebody through either your presence or rotor wash or a low pass show of force or show of presence?
Absolutely. And typically it's in an open field environment. Where we've had to do that is at times just a guy running through the field with no real end in sight, and might be heading towards a populated area and trying to cut them off before they get there. And one occasion we set down the UE while the guy was running, and the rotor wash itself blew him over, and our guys from the crew got out of the helicopter, ran over and grabbed him.
Do you put dogs on the helicopter?
We've trained with the dogs getting in and out of the helicopter, and so we haven't had the occasion to deploy from the helicopter yet with the dogs.
Soon.
2 questions I want to ask each of you, just kind of to wrap us up, and I'll give them both to you so you can plan accordingly. The first is, if you had a message that you wanted the general public to know and understand about law enforcement and the challenges that we face, just kind of in general to society, about the hard work that you guys are doing, philosophically, what would that message be? And then the other part of it is also to individual officers, especially new, young, rookie officers. Do you have any message for them in terms of the challenges that you face as commanders, and understanding that you want the best for them and all those things, and that morale and all these things that you're balancing? Kind of what is your message in terms of where you want their headspace to be?
As far as new officers and people that are either considering law enforcement or already here, it's definitely a different time than it was back when I joined. So, like I said before, there's things we have to worry about now that we didn't back then. One of the things I've learned, even since I think social media and the news and everything if they get a cop that has made a mistake, if it's a questionable shooting or it's a race issue or something like that, and they just televise it for 3 months straight, and that's all you see, that's all you hear, and all they show is the protests. Mm-hmm. All they show is the riots and all these things. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's been a cop longer than I have last year. I'm in charge of ERT, the emergency response team, as well, so we handle all the riots, crowd control, stuff like that. And sometimes with new guys especially, the opinion is everybody hates us. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement just gets a bad rap. And I'll say, well, we had a protest down here last year, and there was about 200 people there. So I said, there's almost 700,000 people here in Albuquerque in Bernalillo County. There was only 200 here protesting. That's not even close to 1%. We go to these demos that we do. We go to these public events, community centers, and stuff like that. And we get little kids coming up to us, giving us police prayer cards, giving us thank you cards. They bring us snacks downtown. There's all these organizations now that are pro-law enforcement. So don't pay attention to the noisemakers, is what I would say. Don't pay attention to the negativity. Make good decisions, but there are way, way more people out there that are pro-cop and pro-law enforcement than you realize, because the media only shows the negative part. They only show the noisemakers, people that are protesting with their signs and getting interviewed about a family member that maybe got shot by the cops or something like that. They don't talk about the officer involved, or the officer got shot, the officer involved shootings. They may talk about that once, that an officer was killed. There have been way more cops killed in the line of duty in the last 5 years than there have been questionable police shootings that made the news.
Yeah, one of the things Mike talks a lot about is you never see all the times he would have been well within his rights to pull the trigger and didn't.
Right. They don't talk about all the less
the
lethal
restraint
issues
that he has expressed,
where somebody got beanbagged or tased, where they would have been totally justified shooting that person, and basically save the guy's life. Which is way better, I think. So there are way more people out there that love us than dislike law enforcement. Mm-hmm. A message to the new guys.
Agree.
And I'd totally agree with Lieutenant Blackmon. There's not a day that goes by that I don't get the random citizen coming up and telling me thank you for so much for what you're doing. You guys are doing an outstanding job, and that goes a long way to keep us going. And I really appreciate the support that we get from the community here. And as far as and that is one of the more important things to bring out to the prospective law enforcement officer is you're going to have a lot of support. It's going to be a great job, and you'll really enjoy your time doing it. There's a lot of there's a great feeling that you get when you help somebody out in the way of being a law enforcement officer. It brings a whole new meaning to your worth and value in the community.
If I'm a community member and I want to support you guys in some more substantial way than a high five, is there anything that I can advocate for you, for example, for resources for you? Is there, in general, having more funding always helps. Having more manpower always helps. But for example, I know in the East Mountains, east of Albuquerque, there are some communication blackout zones where you guys can't talk on the radio. Is that something that, on the resource side, is there something you need that you're not getting that, if the community could step up and say, hey, get our guys this?
We're always in need of vehicles. That's a big thing. But a lot of times, especially now with the number of auto thefts, and we utilize a hit technique which ends up damaging our vehicles. It's not an accident. It's a technique that we use, and unfortunately,
if you do it right,
unfortunately ends up kind of hurting us on the insurance side as well. So it makes it look like we're crashing into things, but it's a technique just like any other technique that you might use in law enforcement. So we're using the vehicle as a tool, but unfortunately that ends up impacting our fleet. So as far as that goes, those are things that that's one big thing that obviously we need. But what goes a long way is just the overall support when it comes time to voting on bonds. Obviously, communicating with county commissioners, city councilors, and things of that nature, and being involved and just having good citizenship, and maybe even participating in a law enforcement academy to learn more about your law enforcement officers.
I think one of the things that, in addition to what Undersheriff Koren's talking about, one of the more frustrating things, despite like the public opinion, I think, is, especially in New Mexico, is the light sentencing that we have for bad guys.
Crazy.
So I would tell people to, vote for it, push for it, like stronger sentencing. These violent offenders that get out and do it again and do it again. We have way too many victims out there that are targeted by guys that should be in prison.
Yep.
So I'd say go out and make our job worthwhile. We hate to do things where it seems like we did it in vain. We chased a guy, even shot at a guy shot at us. We put all this resource and risk our lives to go catch somebody, and the judge lets him out the next day.
Catch and
then
release.
Even worse is he goes and hurts somebody else.
Yep.
So vote for the people that are going to keep people in jail.
I want to just bug you guys and go back real quick. I got your to the rookies message.
I think I skipped your first question. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I shouldn't have compounded them on you, but I wanted there to be a clear division between the two.
I answered the one I remembered best.
So yeah. But just to the general public.
I have a 5-part question.
Yeah.
Ready to go. Okay.
To the general public, what do you, and I think this kind of hits on it pretty well, but more generally speaking, what do you guys wish that people understood about the jobs that you're doing?
I think primarily is that we have a tough job. It's easy to judge when you see something on the news and you can watch it over and over and think, oh, I wouldn't have done that. That was a bad shoot. Or they shouldn't have done that to that guy when it's something questionable like that. People have to understand that we're making split-second decisions. We can't hit a pause button. We don't know what you know when you watch the 20-minute clip on the news.
Over and over
right.
and over.
And you're making the decision based on that. Mm-hmm. So cops are human. And I'm not saying cops haven't made mistakes, because they have. There's things I've seen cops do on video where I'm like, oh, that was bad. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have done that. People overreact sometimes. Emotion takes over, but cops are human. And the human factor sometimes plays into it, and sometimes not in a good way. So just understand, some of the decisions we make, 98% of the time, we're doing the right thing. It's that one bad thing that people want to focus on. And like you were saying, how all the times Mike has used techniques or less than lethal or something like that, where they didn't shoot somebody, where they didn't hurt somebody. and things like that don't get talked about.
Yeah.
So I would say, look at the big picture. Don't just focus on that one bad thing. Look at the 9,000 other things we did right.
Sir?
No, I think that pretty much hits the nail right on the head. And kind of back to the taking that 20 seconds of video that the media might have pulled from somebody's body cam or from somebody's cell phone. Although a picture is often said to be worth 1,000 words, it doesn't give you true perspective on those things. And there's a whole Force Science Institute that talks about that in some depth. And I know there's sometimes some push from people to try to get more body worn cameras, and without understanding the full extent of some of the impact on an agency when an agency does make that kind of investment. And I know this is probably another separate topic for your show, but
I wasn't sure if you guys would want to talk about that. For those not familiar, this agency specifically, as far as I know, does not do body worn cameras.
Yeah,
and that's
correct.
a little local controversy.
Yeah, and we don't, and it's not that we're opposed to them. It's just that we haven't found any good evidence to support getting the body worn cameras, especially when we're faced with other priorities and making investments in other areas in our department.
I think people don't know how ridiculously expensive it is to store that data. Video data takes up a ton of space. It costs a ton of money. So that's obviously one issue. And one of the things I try and tell people is, don't think because you saw a video of the cop's perspective, because it was a camera on his lapel, that you know what it was like that day. You weren't there. You may have seen the video. You weren't there.
And
you don't know what it's like.
Perceptual
so don't
distortion
judge.
that he probably went through with
you
under
were
the
seeing a
adrenaline.
two-dimensional view of something that was going on for hours.
Cops
sometimes
cops get this. There's been this big push lately about having empathy, and it's interesting because as the guy that's sat on the other end of the PowerPoint, you don't learn empathy from a PowerPoint, and I think that's one of the things about the public, kind of that you're alluding to, is that what having empathy for our position is where we think maybe that is lacking, is you can watch the body camera footage, but you don't feel what self-preservation does to you. Those survival-oriented behaviors and how those interfere with your decision-making. When that adrenaline hits, you lose 100 IQ points, and you start making decisions like your life depends on it. It clouds your judgment a little bit, for better or for worse.
And I think one of the reasons why we do this project is to help communicate that, right? Yeah. And along those lines, we really appreciate you guys and your time. And hopefully people will listen to this and learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a cop, what it's like to be a Bernalillo County Sheriff deputy, and a SWAT guy and an air unit guy. We really appreciate it. We hope people learn from it. And if anyone has any questions, when we post this, come onto our Facebook page, talk to us about it. We will ask those questions on your behalf back through the Public Affairs Office here. We really appreciate the Sheriff's Office, and their Public Affairs has been awesome to work with, and we really appreciate them. Thanks.
Thank you guys for doing this and for putting the word out and being supportive.
Right on.
Law enforcement in general.
Right
Thank
on.
you very much. Let us know if you need anything.
Cheers. Be safe. I need a ride on your Huey, actually. Right on. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.
Take care.
So we're wrapping up our interview with Undersheriff Koren and Lieutenant Blackmon. I thought it was a great interview. I thought it was great value added. We really appreciate Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department for letting us come and record and sharing their insights, both their career mentoring and their tactical insights with us. They have their hands full as an agency with a serious crime problem that is not really within their control, as you heard them talking about with issues in terms of sentencing and bail. So they are catching guys right and left, and I think they're doing a great job with it. And so I really appreciate getting to learn from them and hopefully taking some of their insights and sharing them around the country to other people who are interested in self-defense and law enforcement.
Yeah, obviously Jim can talk better to the local issues. I don't have that perspective to offer, but I know that their PIO, Deputy Maggard, I hope I'm not messing her name up too bad, but she's been a rock star in helping us get this organized and get the right people involved, and that was cool. I think it's important for cops everywhere to look outward as much as they can, because you get stuck in these, in this little bubble of whatever your own department is, and you don't really have anything to compare it to. You don't know what other agencies are doing. You might know a little bit about what the agencies next door are doing, but looking out a little bit farther, I think, is a big deal. And one of the things I want to do with this project as time goes on is try to get more and more of these types of interviews in, so that people understand how the issues are different in different parts of the country. For example, on the East Coast, it might be different than it is on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest versus down in the South. There's a lot of issues obviously at play, and I think having that opportunity to look outward is a big deal. So
yeah, well, there's both physical terrain and human terrain. We have cultural things here in the Southwest in New Mexico and Arizona that maybe you don't have to deal with as much in Michigan, and there's also the fundamental terrain. This particular agency has a lot of mountain work that it has to do. It goes very rural and very urban very quickly. I also owe Deputy Maggard a shout out. She has been great to work with, and she's doing a great job communicating on behalf of her agency, and a good example to follow.
Yeah, and going back to that idea about other agencies, the other thing I think that's important, or the perspective that's important, is agencies that have different sizes and have to work with different amounts of resources. You heard the Undersheriff talking about how they just got a fixed wing plane. It's kind of a new thing to them. Looking at agencies that have those things or don't have them at all, or people who have the manpower and have the ability to staff a certain incident in an appropriate way versus the agencies that only have one or two guys that are going to deal with it. Those are perspectives that play pretty heavily into how the tactics and the decision making and all those things are gonna play out, and I think that's important. I think that the LT and the Undersheriff both did an awesome job of giving their perspective in a candid way that I think is useful for sharing their insight. And I hope that the guys that are the lower ranks can take some of that to heart and appreciate the challenges that they have to face. So that's pretty much all I got. All around appreciative that they took the time. I thought it went well. And if you guys have any questions for them or for us, obviously send them our way, either on Facebook or email, and we'll either get it to them or we'll try to answer your question.
Yeah, it was news to me that they had a aircraft shot down, and
yeah,
that's quite a case study. And so we're probably going to dig into that hopefully in the future. So I hope we get another opportunity to talk to them. I think we're really going places with this podcast, and we're getting more and more listeners and more people new to the project. So we'd like you to engage with us, talk to us on Facebook about it, tell your friends about it. We're getting more and more stickers and swag, and if you're interested, we can send them to you. Check out the articles we're putting out. We just put out a fresh article about fighting at night. We hope you get a chance to check that out. We actually had a little trouble with Facebook. They wouldn't let us advertise that article because it talks about guns. So if you want to support gun rights, go find it on our website, tacticaltangents.com/articles/night.
And also, what's funny about that is it actually doesn't talk that much about guns.
No, we're not selling guns.
It talks about tactical environments at night, and but I think in the headline it said fighting at night, and I think the word fighting is probably what they tunneled.
There was a picture of a guy with a gun.
Oh my God, not a guy with a gun.
So we're selling ideas here at Tactical Tangents, and we hope you join us.
Yep. So you can always get a hold of us. info@tacticaltangents.com is a good email for us. Find us on Facebook. The website obviously has a contact form. If you have connections or there's someone specific that you want us to reach out or you think would be a good guest for the podcast, we're obviously open to that. We put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th, so subscribe if you want to get those to whatever device that you got. And we're also about to launch our new newsletter, a weekly bulletin that we're going to put out. We're going to call it Fast Transients. If you want to sign up for that, you can go to newsletter.tacticaltangents.com. There's a form to fill out, and you'll get those probably weekly to your email. newsletter.tacticaltangents.com. Be sure to check it out, and thanks for listening.